All right, I think we're live. Let me hold on, prop up this mic a little bit so it has a little bit better audio. And hopefully it doesn't like rotate around as I'm streaming. So I'm Joshua Kemble. This is my live stream where I talk about the process of working on my comic, Two Stories Book 2. I'm a graphic novelist who does, I guess I'm a cartoonist who's basically works on graphic novels when I'm not art directing, which is what I do for my day job. And then I've been a professional artist for over 15 years, doing illustration, graphic design, all that kind of fun stuff. And if you're curious about the comic I'm working on today, it's going to be Two Stories Book 2. Two Stories Book 1 is part 1 of this kind of epic story I've been creating about faith and mental illness that's hand-lettered, hand-inked, and addresses some really heavy topics like faith and mental illness. So you can get this comic at a reduced price basically on Amazon right now. It's at a pretty low rate there, so you can get it there. Or if you want to support local bookstores, your LCS, that kind of thing, you can ask them to order Two Stories by Joshua Kemble from Ingram, and it's out through Marcosia. And that would be a way to kind of get introduced to my work. I also have another book coming out in May of 2022 called Jacob's Apartment. That is a story about the questions that can shake even the strongest of faith. And it's a story about two roommates who are, at first glance, kind of seem like polar opposites, and find common threads of identity in their pursuit of the same dreams in like the literary world, but also in their sleeping world. They also have interwoven dreams, and the story ends up being kind of a slice of life coming of age story that basically deals with loss, memory, dreams, and what kind of common threads unite ambitious young people. And so, yeah, so that's available through Graphic Mundi. That's the publisher who's going to be putting it out. I'm really excited about it. At some point, I'm going to be able to announce a little giveaway that I'll be doing, because I'm going to be at Los Angeles Comic-Con on the 3rd through the 5th. And I think my table is C22. But I will double check that, and I will tell you if you're ever curious about live appearances, including where to meet me if you happen to be going to LA Comic-Con as well. You can just go to my website, joshuakemble.com, click on live events, and that also goes for my graphic novels. If you're curious about Two Stories, you can just go to joshuakemble.com and click on quarterly stories. And if you're curious about Jacob's Apartment, you can just basically click Jacob's Apartment on joshuakemble.com. And if you want to catch me at LA Comic-Con, maybe pick up one of those exclusive prints that will be available only really through like live events, and has a limited run and is a promotional for Jacob's Apartment. Come check that out at live events. So yeah, so that's all the fun recap stuff for anybody who's new. And basically these streams, what I do is just kind of go through working on the 100 and something pages that I have to pencil and ink in order to kind of make this thing happen. So that gives you a little bit about me. Yeah, we're going to start the stream. I'll also say at the top too, if you have any questions or you want to share what you're working on, like I have a lot of creatives who stop by on these streams, and it's always kind of a coin toss to know who all will show up, because I often start these at, like, in this case, 11:45. Got home from work and was pretty exhausted. So I got my son to bed and that kind of thing, and then took a really quick nap. And so now I'm going to try to, during this stream, at minimum, I'm going to ink this panel, which is a close-up of an eyeball, as you can see. Although I should just sort of do the artsy thing and try to do the the things. GZDR4EV asked, do any of your comics cover the pandemic and social issues that arise because of it? So 2 stories, actually. My first graphic novel talks a lot about depression and panic disorder in a really real and kind of honest way. And while the events don't take place during the pandemic, it definitely addresses a lot of social issues that came up, I think, for a lot of people during the lockdowns. So I think it's pretty relevant to the time that we live in. And it was kind of coincidental, just the fact that, like, the topic dealt so heavily with mental illness, and then we had a global pandemic, which is like a very huge struggle, I think, for people who've had or do struggle with mental illness or any sort of neurodiversity. So, but good question, GZDR4EV. I think that's GZ Draw Forever. I don't know. Anyhow, very, very good question, man. Thank you for asking. Okay, so here we go. We're going to rock this. I also noticed on the last stream that, like, my 08s were out. And I like to use microns for my ruling lines. And I just ordered some more and they came. So hopefully we get, I also get my shipment of refill cartridges for my Pentel Pocket brush pen, because those are kind of go-tos in the case of that. I hope I answered your question, GZDR4EV. All right. So crack open a beer and start working on my stuff. I'm doing these, like, mango carts. Pretty good, from Golden Road Brewing. I got, like, hooked on those a couple years ago. And I think they're owned by, like, a larger brewing company, but oh, okay. He said Game Zone Doctor for Evil, as in Dr. Evil from Austin Powers. Oh, dude, that's very cool. Okay. Well, that's awesome. I haven't watched Austin Powers in a long time and really enjoyed those movies at the time. And now I'm curious if they hold up well. I would imagine they do. But I remember at the time it was really cool because I really liked So I Married an Axe Murderer. I just thought that movie was a lot of fun. And so it was neat to see Mike Myers like have, like, this full film again. When Austin Powers came out, that shows you, I guess, how old I am. But yeah, So I Married an Axe Murderer was, like, one of my favorite kind of silly comedies of the 90s. So we're just basically, what I do on these pages is I usually start with, like, the contours and stuff like that, and just get the line art done. And then I'll come in with a brush and kind of knock out all these all of these pencil lines and stuff. So fun times, guys. Yeah, it's been a pretty active, crazy day here. I feel like having some pretty good momentum. I feel like when you're working on personal comic projects, you know, that are sort of like creator owned, self driven things, even honestly, even with client work and stuff, it's a lot of what you do relies on like kind of retaining momentum. And it's like a very weird psychological thing, I guess, where it's like you get into a zone, like you get in a good area or like in the pocket. I think a lot of athletes call it that. Um, and you like, you know, can kind of maintain a pretty steady output. But maintaining that without like completely burning out is a juggling act that you'll frequently see me dancing with on this channel. Because it's like, I definitely need to get these books done. And for anyone familiar or new to the channel, I've talked about it, but it's like I basically have the promotion for a graphic novel that's coming out in May going on. So that's pretty time consuming and will only become more so as we get closer to the release date. I have the promotion for Two Stories Book One, which was like the first book that I'm working on the sequel to right now. And that's pretty time consuming. I have this graphic novel that I'd like to finish in about a year. And then on top of that, there's another potential one coming down the pike that's longer, but it's in a different style. And that one I'm doing digitally, and it's like a historical graphic novel that I'm partnering with, like that I have a collaborator on, and we potentially might have a book deal for that. And I think that would be due in like 2 years. So that means that for the next year or so, I need to be making comics nonstop. I'm glad I made that miss mark line there because that is all black, that little section. So yeah, like momentum's going to be really important for me to be able to pull this off. And so my hope is at minimum, I'm going to be doing like a panel a day. But in reality, I'd like to do a little more than that, especially if it's a simpler panel like this, like a close-up. These are really fun to do. And then GZD, Dr. Evil, basically, I'm just going to say, with cryptocurrency and NFTs getting buzz, how do you feel about selling your panels as NFTs and no longer worry about telling full stories? The thing is, like, I make a pretty okay living doing art professionally with my day job because I work as like an art director for a company out here. And so like when it comes to like kind of cashing in, I'm not opposed to NFTs. I've talked pretty extensively about NFTs on a couple other live streams, but I'm not as familiar with them. I'm hesitant to do them myself because of the buy-in. It just seems risky, and I'm already kind of taking a big risk on doing slice of life, like sort of auto bio, like literary graphic novels, which is kind of a hard market to crack, even once you have a publisher. Like that's the first challenge in there, is getting a publisher who will kind of put your stuff out. And then on top of that, just the odds of sales in graphic novels is pretty slim. So I'm already kind of hitting a pretty risky thing with my personal projects. And the weird thing is, I wouldn't want to not be making full graphic novels. Like the thing I'm most passionate about is graphic novels. So while any source of income as an artist, especially sources of income, like if NFTs were really lucrative, and maybe if I had like somebody partnering or something who was paying the fees to make the NFTs and maybe helping with some of the coding to like possibly launch it, I would probably be more open to it. But like as of now, I don't really personally see it as something I want to kind of dip into. Although honestly, I have some friends in comics who are offering NFTs, and I think it's a good option. So I hope that kind of answers your question. But for me, like my favorite form of comics is like the printed book. And so to me, like that's what I want to do, is be in the business of making books. And every book I do is available as like a web comic or like a digital comic. But still, like I do like that physical comic, I hope that answered your question there, Dr. Evil. And anyone watching via YouTube, Dr. Evil, I believe, is joining us from Twitch. So, where are you joining us from, Dr. Evil? Out of curiosity, like whereabouts are you? You don't have to be too specific. I'm definitely not trying to like get people to like dox themselves or something. I just always am curious to find out where people are from on the in the chats and stuff. It's fun. One of the things I love about doing these live streams is I get to meet a lot of people from all over the world, and that's kind of awesome, especially finding out like what other artists are kind of working on and stuff like that. This might be the fastest panel that I've made for this comic. You can quote me on that after I start adding all the rendering and stuff. Quite often when I do these streams, I'll be like, this is going to be really simple and quick. And then that'll be like 2 or 3 hours later. You find out that's not the case. Yeah, so I think okay, so Dr. Evil was saying from New York, which is awesome. New York's really rad. My publisher for my second graphic novel's in Pennsylvania, so it's like, which I think is like right near New York. And I might be doing some cons in New York toward the end of the year. I'm still kind of working that out. I do want to do TCAF too, but I have to stay on top of that. I think I need to get like a passport and stuff like that to do something in Toronto. But New York's a rad city. I don't know if you're saying New York City or New York State, because I am making that common mistake of like when I hear somebody say New York, I think NYC, but then again, it could be anywhere. And it's a very diverse state with like a lot of different cultures and subcultures and stuff like that. So I don't want to make assumptions. You also said we just had the artist Beeple show off at its exhibit as an NFT, and it sold for over 29 million. Yeah, there's big money in it. I think especially for like really established artists. Yeah, I'm not denying that there's a lot of potential money in it. And like that's why I'm like I'm risk averse. I tend to like if I'm doing investing, I tend to be slightly risk averse, but I don't pretend that there aren't like massively huge winners. And NFTs are really interesting too because I think it's set up to where you get like a percentage for every sale. So it's kind of like if you were, a commissioned artist like back in the Renaissance or something, and you sell your painting. That was it. Like that was your cut. It's not like every time that painting got swapped or sold or accrued in value, like your family or yourself would like reap the benefits of that resale. And I think that to me is really cool with NFTs, the idea that like you could start it and you sell them at like a lower rate. And then as they accrue in value, let's say they get to the point where they're selling for millions, you're getting a chunk of that. And I think that is a really cool thing. But it definitely could be like one of those scenarios where I remember years ago, a friend of mine recommending me getting into Bitcoin. And this is back when it was still, in like the dollar amounts, like I don't even know if it had become like a $10 per Bitcoin. And I remember being like, I don't know, and kind of holding off. And then like, obviously if I had bought Bitcoin at that point, I would have been able to probably retire. So, I mean, like definitely take what I'm saying about NFTs with a grain of salt. I'm not opposed to them. I just, I haven't really pursued them yet. Jimmy was saying, what days for LA Comic-Con? All the days. So it's the 3rd through the 5th. And I'm actually pretty excited because we're going to be, I'm going to be in Artist Alley and sharing a table with my friend Ken Mora, who's got a book out through the same publisher that Two Stories is. And then I just found out from my current publisher for my second graphic novel for Jacob's Apartment, Graphic Mundi, that we're going to be making exclusives. Like just little, I can't really talk too much about them, but they're going to be really cool exclusives specifically tied into Jacob's Apartment that you'll only be able to get a hold of at those conventions. So I'm pretty excited about that. But yeah, I think I'll be there the 3rd through the 5th. So I'm pretty excited too, because it's the first convention I've done in a while. I had this, it's so weird to think about now because I'm like, right now I'm starting, well, I'm like knee deep in my 3rd graphic novel, like executing it. But at the time when I was working on Two Stories, I made a deal with myself, and I'm kind of weird like that. I'll kind of agree to something as like an incentive to get me to finish something. And so I basically said to myself that I wouldn't allow myself to go to conventions until I finished my graphic novel. And I mainly did that because I actually enjoy attending conventions too, especially if I have friends who are going to be boothing there and stuff like that. So I was like, I can't booth or sell at a convention or go to a convention until I finish my graphic novel. And I finally finished it. And then it was like, by the time we had it out, because that was the agreement I had made, where I also was like, I want it to be like, it has to be printed, like it has to, be published. So by the time that came out and I was all ready to rock a bunch of cons to kind of promote 2 stories, it was like the pandemic hit and we were all in lockdown. So like conventions were off the table. So it made for a really interesting kind of book release because I couldn't do like store signings or conventions. So all of my ground game for that book had to be kind of initially, podcasts and video and stuff like that, and just social media in general. But anyhow, now I feel like I've lost the. And then Jimmy said, "I'll try to pop in on Friday or Saturday. Probably Saturday though." Cool. Yeah, and if you want, I have a section on my site that's basically, I think it's called like appearances or signings or something like that, and it's like on the main menu, and so you can like click that, and that'll tell you like my table number and all that stuff. So like if you're at LA Comic Con and you're like kind of between like awesome panels or walking the floor, especially if you're in Artist Alley, that way you'll know where to stop by to say hi. Because yeah, it'd be cool. And that'll be like the first convention I've gone to in a while, and so I'm really excited about it, but also like really curious about it. Like I'm curious if, like, to me, I'm kind of curious if people have been like just like aching for like big social events like that, like I have. And I remember like the second my wife and I were vaccinated, it was just kind of a waiting game where it's like, okay, like now hopefully they'll have it for our kid, and then it'd be just nice to be able to be out and not be like super stressed about what's going on out there. So yeah, so like for me, I feel a slight relief of stress that like there's a lower risk to like kind of going there. And so I'm kind of excited about like kind of seeing people at a big event like that. Like it's going to be really fun. And it's something I will value, I think, a lot more. And I'm kind of thinking it's got to be kind of like a thing all of us are valuing a lot more after spending such a long time not being able to do things like that. So I'm super excited about it. I think LA Comic Con will be awesome. And I just realized like half the inking I was just doing on that eye is like not even visible to you guys. All right, so let's see here. But yeah, Jimmy, if you end up at LA Comic Con, man, let me know. Hit me up. It'd be nice to meet you. And also, you might be able to get a hold of one of those little exclusives from Graphic Mundi. Let's see here. All right, so we have most of that. I just have to do this eyebrow. We're getting there, guys. It's fun times. So also part of why I'm starting with LA Comic Con because it's pretty local, and it's a good way to kind of feel out like what the vibe of conventions might be like in the coming year. But I'm really excited. There's some talk of potentially like Mocha or TCAF too, which I'm really stoked about. Could you transfer your skills with the pen to tattooing someone? If I wanted that panel with the eye on my back, would you be able to do it? Or are they two different skill sets? Okay, I have a couple buddies who are tattoo artists, and it is definitely a huge advantage if you get into tattooing, from what I understand, having drawing skills. So in theory, yes, but tattooing is a very specialized skill that kind of requires a specific way of handling a gun, like a tattoo gun. And it requires years of practice to really get down. And it's kind of a weird, at least in the US, it's a very like mentor student sort of scenario with tattooing, where initially you usually kind of start as like a grunt at a studio. And this is just my understanding of it from the friends who've done it. And you'll kind of do a lot of like cleaning and just sort of assisting. Then you kind of work your way up to like assisting and doing a lot of practice tattoos. I think a lot of tattoo artists start with like fruit. There's certain fruits, and this is where I'm going to like totally expose the fact that like I have never studied tattooing. I've just had friends who do it. But I think it's like grapefruit. There's a couple fruits in particular that have like the skin of them have a similar texture to human skin. And so you have to kind of practice a lot on those so that when you're drawing, you're not like overly puncturing the person that you're drawing. Because you're basically, when you're tattooing, you're using like a needle. Back in the day, it was actually manual, I think, but it's like a needle that's rigged to a motor. So the needle's just puncturing the skin like over and over again. And then sometimes it's multiple needles on the head of the tattoo gun. But basically, they're just poking the skin and filling that basically injury with ink. So there's all sorts of studying you need to do to be able to do it safely. I think you might need to get certified. I don't know. But I do know there's health regulations to it. It requires like years to really learn how to do, especially like a steady line that doesn't kind of wobble all over the place without like severely like scarring the person you're giving it to, like in a way that like messes up the way it dries. Because that's the other thing, like a lot of new tattoo artists, and again, I'm not a tattoo artist, this is just answering your question on that, but a lot of new tattoo artists, from what I hear, first off, like they'll make it a much more painful experience for the person during getting the tattoo. But then also it might look good the day you get it, and then like 2 days later when it dries, it's going to scar unevenly, and like stuff like, because the areas where they like dipped into your skin a little too far are going to like welt up and get all crazy. So you'll notice that about like a bad tattoo or an amateur tattoo, they tend to have like really inconsistent filling of the color. Like the line will kind of blob in and out, and you'll also see like the skin is like pretty different. For like a pro tattoo artist, like they're going to do it and it'll almost look like it's just ink on your skin. But like a new tattoo artist or a tattoo artist who doesn't know what they're doing can really just make an ugly thing that's like permanently attached to you. And they could be a really great artist, but they just aren't familiar with that canvas. So yeah, if I was going to get a tattoo with my art, which some people have, I've never tattooed my own art on me because I was worried I'm going to get better, and then I'll have this like permanent reminder of how bad I sucked. Hey, Ronnie's joining us in the chats. How's it going, buddy? Yeah, so like yeah, that's to me like that would be my biggest fear. Like I would probably really hesitate, if not never, tattoo somebody myself. But I have had people get tattoos of my art, and you can take it to like a really decent, seasoned tattoo artist, and they're gonna do a much better job of like transferring that thing to your skin than I could ever do. Um, but yeah, hopefully that answered your question. But it can be a really hard living being a tattoo artist, but it can also be very lucrative depending on the area and time slot that you get, and your overhead to kind of have space in a studio. And then also like your experience with like dealing with the hierarchical structure of like the tattoo industry, which can be pretty difficult. It was actually pretty interesting. We had a friend, Squatchy, on Artcasters to kind of talk about his experience, because he now kind of sells comics for a living and like makes exclusive, like I think he does like collectible exclusive covers of comics. Like he'll get blanks and kind of do custom art on them. But he started as a tattoo artist, and he had some really interesting horror stories on that episode. So I don't remember the specific episode of Artcasters that was, but it's either on mine or Scott Cirkland's channel. And I try to add every Artcasters episode to my playlist on my YouTube channel under Artcasters. And if you see the one with Squatchy, which I think was fairly recent, it must have been like 5 or 10 episodes ago. Yeah, that was actually touched on in the conversation, because he was a guy who worked in a tattoo shop for like years, and went through that whole system. Ronnie said he's doing pretty good. How's your comic coming along, man? Ronnie Gunter does some pretty cool horror comics, and also does the show Comics de la Muerte, which covers the topics of like deep horror and horror in comics, which I think is pretty awesome. But I really admire a good tattoo artist, and I have heard from multiple tattoo artists that there is like a drought in the industry sometimes with like people who can draw and tattoo. Like there is actually, depending on the area you're in, because I think if you're in like a high traffic area where tattoos are like all the rage, like there's probably too many. But in a lot of areas, like they really need tattoo artists that like can draw. So yeah, let's see. Cool. Ronnie said he sent 2 panels. Are those panels I should share? If so, I'll probably share those panels on my next break. When I do these live streams, I'll usually go for about an hour, and then I take a little break. And I'm pretty excited about how quick this panel is coming along. Quite often you guys will notice too, like after I do just kind of the rougher outlines, I'll kind of then get into like some of the more feathered fills, like so it'll be like solid blacks and feathering, and then I'll tend to try to work into eventually doing the hatching and stuff. And the way that I move my hand on the page is like all about trying to get the angles that I need to get to kind of get the line I'm trying to get. And also economically trying to choose areas that aren't going to like smudge the previous inks that I laid down. Cool. So Ronnie gave me the okay to share those, so we might be able to get a peek at our good friend of the stream and art casters and our whole community. A little sneak peek of some of the panels he just recently finished, if they are shareable. Are they safe for work, Ronnie? Let's see here. And then Ronnie does a show with Jason, and I just watched him recently on a stream with my friend Marshall, where they were talking about abstract comics. And it sort of tripped me out because one of my close friends when I lived in Portland, Oregon, was this guy named Mike Getziv, who's like, whole thing is abstract comics. Like he spent, decades working on abstract comics and doing them really cool explorations and stuff. But it was fun to see people from a different friend group like suddenly jamming into abstract comics, because it's like, oh man, I got to connect these people. So okay. And then I think Ronnie said they're safe, so that's good. Or maybe you were saying they aren't safe for work. Let me peek, see if there's something I can share. All right, cool. I'm going to definitely share those. So what I'll do is when I get to the point of, okay, it's like safe for work, I just realized it's one of those things of like when you, like I realized I was at fault there in the sense of like, and I do this sometimes where I feel like I'm asking a really obvious question. And then when it's answered, I'm like, wait a minute, did I ask that clearly? So thank you for clarifying that, because I think the way I asked it was kind of jumbled. Let's see here. But yeah, so we'll show a little sneak peek at that. I'll probably share the art that's going to be exclusive. It's actually a friend of mine that is one of my favorite illustrators, but also a friend. And they had done some really cool art of one of my characters from Jacob's apartment. And I asked them, because we were looking to do promo material, and I got approval from that friend to kind of make a little exclusive that ties into Jacob's apartment, but hopefully it'll be like kind of unique and kind of cool and a little different from like even the way I approach the style and the story, but definitely like will be like a cool thing that people can kind of hang on to. That's very exclusive for that event. So I think it'll be cool. I'm excited about it. But I think once we're at the point of like kind of it's at the printer, they're being run, we know the shipping is going to be on time, then I'll start giving more specifics about it. It's kind of neat to see, like my son's heard a song recently on like a Minecraft YouTube video or something, because that's his jam. Like I think most 8-year-olds are kind of really into Minecraft at this point. But there's like a little Minecraft music video or something that's edited to like a song on there. And he got the song like stuck in his head, and he's been like singing it a lot the last few days. And it's just kind of fun to see him. Like, he was all excited about kind of getting a song stuck in his head. I think it might have been one of the first songs. It's not like an educational song that he was like, I mean, other than the like kids songs and stuff we used to play when he was younger, that he like is just really ecstatic about like the song and this video. So that's been fun to see, like kind of like a young kid like connecting to art. Although it's fun as a parent because it's like I don't necessarily like the song, but I kind of like it a little more now because my son likes it. It's weird how that works. So now I'm curious what everybody in the chats are like watching is working on. Feel free to share it in the chats. All right, so we're making some progress now. And I for sure can see myself finishing this panel on stream. Sometimes these streams can go like 5 or 6 hours. This one might be a little shorter. All right, Dr. Evil said working on cryptocurrency. Are you building cryptocurrency? Are you like, I'm curious, you were asking about NFTs too. What do you do with related to NFTs? Do you do anything related to NFTs? And also, would you recommend it? And yeah. Are you mining for cryptocurrency? Are you coding cryptocurrency? Or are you like building cryptocurrency like NFTs or something? I'm insanely curious. Jimmy said, building my new button machine maker. Okay. You got a button maker? That's awesome. I have to ask because I know there's a couple. Is it the one with the 3? Like, there's one that I've seen that has like a little rotating thing that has like 3 little bed areas where you can kind of like put the blank. And then there's another where it has almost like one bowl that you put the blank in, and then you kind of line everything up and you just kind of punch it down. I'm curious what kind you got. Button makers are fun. I should probably at some point invest in getting one of those because they're surprisingly like affordable. And they're kind of fun to make. Like, once you have a decent maker, it's like pretty fun to make buttons. And they're great giveaways or like low end items to offer at a table at a convention. And they're kind of awesome because, if you need something like last minute too, and you have your own button maker, as long as you have the blanks and the plastic cover. Okay, Jimmy was saying it has 2 and it slides left to right. Oh, that's awesome. That sounds really cool. Dr. Evil, ooh, man, you're asking such great questions. Thank you for asking these interesting questions. He said, would you be upset if someone bought your comics, had them graded and sealed in a package by CGC, and then never read it? No. Like, to me, I don't personally go about comics that way. Like my interest in comics isn't really as like a collector. I definitely have like a collector deep in me. But my main interest in comics for myself is reading them. And so to me that's the way my fandom works when it comes to reading books. Like I don't tend to like buying a book just for like aesthetically having it around. That being said, if I had like Action Comics #1 or something, I'm not going to leave that open because that's like a massively valuable thing. And that I just, you'd probably want that sealed. But I will say for my whole comic collection at home, like I don't have anything like slabbed and sealed away forever. I have everything loose and open. And if I have like a special collectible issue, I'll usually get 2 copies, one that I can read and one that I can't. But that being said, it's like I don't really judge. Like some people like being judgmental of that would be like equivalent to like being judgmental of somebody who like collects baseball cards. Like it's not bad to like enjoy collecting baseball cards or coins or whatever it is. And if comics are your thing and you like slabbing and grading them, cool. Now, if you like buy out entire runs and like make it hard for people to obtain it or like artificially drive up the cost of it for like regular readers, like that kind of sucks. But yeah, I have no complaints with like people who want to buy comics and collect them. And if if somebody wanted to do that with mine, they could, although I do graphic novels, so I think that might be a little harder to slab than like a floppy. Wow, Jimmy said he got his button maker for $85 and $94 with tax. Dude, I don't know if you're able to send links, but on here. But if not, like maybe send me a link on Facebook to where you got that button maker. Unless maybe you got it on eBay or something. It was a one-time thing, but that's a pretty fair rate for those button makers. Sometimes they can be up to like 200, so it's not a bad rate. And again, like, that might seem like a big investment to people, but like, you can sell those like for like $1 a piece, maybe a little more, maybe like $1.25 or something. And then have them, also offered as like a like maybe you sell like a chunk of them, like, so it's like maybe it's 6 for a lower price or whatever amount you want, where you kind of create an incentive for people to buy them in bulk. But the point is, if you had buttons at a trade show that you're selling, that's going to pay itself back in like a couple shows. And then Ronnie said most of the comics I have are the ones I did for the review show, especially the ones done by indie artists. Nice. And then Jimmy said Amazon had recommended it. That's awesome, man. That's a cool thing. You'll have to tell me how it works and stuff. I bet it's a really cool thing. I used to have one long ago in like high school when I was in a band, not band, but a band. And it was fun, because you people like those hipster buttons. They're great giveaways. They're great like low end items to have, and they're pretty quick to make. So yeah. That's pretty rare. And then he said, with 500 buttons, so it'll pay off eventually. The reason you would or should be upset is that the person is waiting for your demise to then cash in. They're hoping you have a skiing accident or get attacked by a shark so they can say they have your last work. I guess. It's weird, man. I mean, collectors, I guess, might be hoping that like the artist dies for collectability's sake, I guess, but I don't know if that's as much of the case with comics. Maybe I'm just less familiar with collectors, but I feel like with fine art, 100% that. Like, if you're a painter, I think there are like a weird group of collectors that would probably be very happy to see, you know, a painter die at like their prime or their peak, because it would, you know, in theory, appreciate the value of their work. I don't know if it always works that way with comics, especially indie comics. I think, unfortunately, I think indie comics are full of a lot of artists that will sort of fade in obscurity that should be known, you know? But yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting thought. I kind of tend to think why people slab. I'm going to have a better hopeful opinion of those people. I think like a lot of the time they're just assuming, like, so if you think about like what's going to cause a comic to accrue in value more, if the artist passes away, and comics not so much that I can think. Maybe mainstream comics, like big properties, like, you know, but the one thing that would probably help something accrue in value is the second it's like bought out and like made into a movie or something like that, or it becomes like a giant franchise. So you want to think, I don't know, I would think if you're like slabbing indies, you want to go more the route of like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles kind of thing, where it's like, you know, if you have those early Turtles comics, those things are crazy valuable. But it's just because they became this iconic property, you know, and so like then everyone wants it, and you have this limited run because it was indie. So you have first editions, you know, early on. Or even like if you think of like early Daniel Klaus, I have Chris Ware books that I bought that I read all the time that are literally valued at like $300 or $400, and it's just because they had a limited print run. They're beautiful books, and then they become rare, and then they're sought after, and so they just accrued in value. But they aren't like higher in value because Chris Ware is dead, you know. He's alive. So I don't know if that makes sense. Really good, man. Asking a lot of good questions, Dr. Evil. Jimmy said, oh yeah, we already handled that, the 500 buttons. But you know, you think about like the first run of Ghost World or whatever has accrued a lot in value, and that's just because that is like an iconic like cult classic, like that movie. But if you got it when it wasn't a movie, you know, or like Walking Dead, right? Kind of same thing. So yeah. At least I would say, like, for me, I would think as a collector, the collectors I've met who are like into the more collecting end, which I'm not. I'm a reader, not necessarily a collector. But the collectors I've met, that's usually what they're gambling on. Like if they're collecting for value, they're gambling more on like the idea that it will get optioned and become like a movie, because that usually has one of the biggest effects on a comic book's value, which is sort of sad. But then again, like I mentioned the Chris Ware stuff too, And a lot of these indie books are done in such limited quantities, that if you're in on like the first editions, I think there could potentially be some money made there. I unfortunately don't really follow that side as much, though. But I'm not judgmental of it, because everybody has their forms of geekdom. And so, again, like, if somebody's into more of the collectability side of things, I can definitely relate to that. And so, yeah, can support that. In the fine art world, though, what you were talking about is really common. And I think I mentioned Ghost World, but Daniel Klaus kind of poked fun at that a little bit in Art School Confidential. This sort of distorted way that the art world will sort of worship biography of an artist. It's been a while since I've seen that movie, though. All right, guys, we've reached the hour mark, which means that after I finish this section of hatching on this eyeball and move the drawing to where you guys can actually see what I'm doing, I'm planning on taking my 30-second break. So, and then we'll take a look at I don't know if it's exclusive, but I'm just going to say it is because that just sounds fun. So Ronnie Gunter sharing an exclusive sneak peek at his comic and some of the panels from it. May not actually be exclusive, but we'll share those in a little bit. But right after I finish my 30-second break. So we're going to rotate back, making progress, you guys. Hope you guys are having a good night so far, and I will be shortly back to share that art by Ronnie. All right, so Ronnie gave us a little sneak peek of what he's working on. He's hanging out with us as Crimson Owl Comics in the chats, and these are some panels that he's knocking out for his horror comic. Thanks for sharing those, man. Very cool. All right. Break is pretty much over for me, so I'm ready to rock and roll and get back to the drawing table. So thanks for sharing those, man. That always gets me pumped to like see what everybody's working on. It's cartooning is kind of a very isolated field, and so it's such a fun experience doing these live streams and being able to like hang out with other creatives who are kind of burning the midnight oil. It's encouraging and exciting, and now I'm curious which side to end up on with this art. I think I'm going to start just up here on the top left. Kind of hopefully I don't end up in smudge land. When you guys work with traditional inks, do you wear one of those little, I do like the old school paper technique. This is something I picked up in art school when we'd work on, initially when I first learned like illustration, we did a lot of paintings and like gouache, like in early illustration classes. I went to Cal State Long Beach, and a lot of the first painting assignments, especially the ones focused on illustration, were you'd have like a taped off illustration board, so you'd tape the corners with like artist tape, and you'd have to do like a cover flap with like a sheet of tracing paper over it just to kind of keep the art protected. And then to kind of keep, especially when you're rendering, like to kind of keep your hand clean from the paper, you would have like a sheet of paper underneath your hand. But since then, a lot of people have like invested in those like kind of like Wacom gloves that like cover your fingers, these two fingers, which are primarily what you're going to have unless you're drawing like a painter, which I wish I had picked up that habit, but I still draw like a lot of people I know, where we're, drawing like we write. So we're using a lot more of our wrist as opposed to like our arm when we're drawing. Although I have friends who like draw primarily with their arm, and I envy them because they're going to have a lot less hand problems as they get older. I didn't say as a creative, like I've already had wrist issues, not so much with this hand, but my other wrist, like I've already had to get a cortisone shot in here just to be able to like move my thumb because of common actions. Like what I do for my day job is primarily doing art on Illustrator and Photoshop, and you use tons of actions. And so you're always using like the shortcut keys, and this thumb was like pretty much torched. Like I couldn't actually move it, which was kind of scary because I also play guitar. And so there was like a good 2 or 3 months last year where I couldn't even hold a chord on my guitar, because to press a guitar chord, you're squeezing the neck with your thumb. That's where you get most of the pressure to kind of push your fingers to hold a chord. And so if this is torched back here and you're trying to pull back, it was just like brutal. Like I couldn't do it. But then I got that cortisone shot, and like everything seems good so far. But I will say, like, that whole suggestion they make in painting classes about like drawing with your arm, 100% do that. Luckily, I do exercise a lot and stuff, and I do a little bit of weightlifting, not like not heavy weightlifting, but so hopefully that will assist a little bit with my mobility as I age. But I will say, like most cartoonists, like you'll notice Charles Schultz, how his style evolved with Peanuts. A lot of kids who grew up when I did were familiar with Peanuts having that kind of wobbly line. And if you look at early Peanuts, it was not done with a wobbly line. That was like his style evolving to match his hands that were just kind of like, that's just how he had to draw. It was like wobbly. So he sort of adapted. Like he's actually, I think Schultz is a really huge inspiration because of that. Like he sort of had such a long, extensive career kind of maintaining quality, but adapting and doing what worked and trying to come up with a way that was aesthetically pleasing to like continue to put out quality comics, you know? Let's see here. The symbol on the dude's chest reminds me of the fidget spinning toy. It's a stress reliever for adults. Is that the inspiration for that symbol, since you said it's a comic about mental health? Actually, this is an audiophile thing. Like he's talking about this. So for people who are like real nerds of music, you'll recognize that thing because it is on a 45 record. They needed a thing called a spacer. So like you have a regular record that would have like a circle about that big, and then a 45 would have a circle about that big. And so the spacer was like this little plastic thing, and these little sides like squeeze so that you can kind of put it in that larger 45 hole, and then it would make it have like a standard LP hole, so you could play it on a record player without having to have a record player that had like an attachment that was the larger one. Is that weird? I hope I explained that. But yeah, you're gonna see that at a lot of like really nerdy like hipster shops. You'll see that symbol, and it's literally just the shape of a spacer for a 45, which is a total audiophile thing, right? And that's actually another reason why I totally relate to collectors, right? Like, if I had like unlimited resources, I would probably collect vinyl. Although much like a lot of, like there's a similar split in vinyl collecting, right? There's some people who buy like a certain LP or record that is, you know, I mean, it's like priceless. So they're never going to put a needle to it, you know? But then there's other collectors who will have like these jazz records that are literally worth like thousands of dollars, like, and they'll just pop them on and play them because they love the music, you know? And there's something about that actual LP or that rare pressing of like a punk rock album that like, you know, there's only like 100 of or something. Yeah, there's a whole community of people that have the same split that exists in comics in the audiophile world, where they'll be like, you don't listen to your records? What's wrong with you? And then there's other people who are like, dude, it's an investment, you know? Like, so I don't know. I feel like that divides almost everywhere. I personally feel like collectors are great, and you know, I honestly dig them. But I definitely am mostly making my comic for readers, right? Like, and I think most collectors are readers. Like, I like to think that at least. But even if they aren't and they're supporting the comic and they're buying issues and stuff, like, that's cool. It is actually helping the artist do the art. But it is funny that separation we were talking about earlier kind of exists in music too. Let's see here. Ronnie said I have to start work. Hope to get episode 3 done before Thanksgiving. Awesome. And then he's going to be out of state on vacation. And he said, have to try to get you on the show again. Yeah, man, I'd be more than happy to go on your show again. It'd be fun too to kind of like, now that I have a new book that I got to promote, you know, coming out. Not too soon. It's coming out in May, but it doesn't hurt to get the word out. So I'd be more than happy to come on. Plus, it's always a fun conversation. It's a fun show. All right, let's see here. Have a good day at work, man. Oh, Jimmy, I think he was talking about Schultz's hand, where he said, I saw that in his documentary, pretty sad but motivational of him to keep it going. Yeah, it's crazy. There's guys that, for that kind of thing, are just super inspiring. There's this artist, Chuck Close, who's, he just passed away, I think, this year. But he was like known in I think it was the 70s as like this young upstart of like this kind of new movement of like photorealism, where he would do these like paintings, like portraits that were like huge, like the size of like a billboard. And they were so photorealistic that people thought they were like a photograph. And they were like perfectly rendered. And he was doing them mostly black and white. So then he had like a severe car accident or motorcycle accident, and became unable to use like a good portion of his body. So he had a certain kind of paralysis. And he developed this whole thing. Like he rigged up his studio to where it had like a hydraulic lift for canvases. And then like he would use like his hands like taped together like this with like his drawing tool like that, because he couldn't use his hands. So he'd just kind of do his paintings like that. And he developed this whole new technique to kind of make these like giant abstract but photorealistic paintings using a grid technique. And it was a similar grid technique to what he was using to achieve photorealism, but he abstracted it, and I personally think like made way more interesting paintings after his accident by adapting and kind of continuing to go on. I think in art there's a million of those stories, where people like face hardship and yet like somehow overcome it. And I think it's good to be aware of those as artists too, because inevitably we're gonna all have something happen. Hopefully not that, but there's inevitably going to be obstacles to what we're doing. And I think like, to me, I love those kind of stories. Cause I feel like one of the goals for me as a cartoonist, like, one of my favorite cartoonists is George Harriman. And there's this classic tale that he did Crazy Cat, this serialized comic for like, I forget, it was like 30 or 40 years. And when he passed away, he had the next week's strips. Like, I think it was at his art desk, and he literally had the next week's strips finished. And, by all reports and accounts, he didn't seem like a miserable guy. Like, he was a pretty happy fellow. But he was really like that dedicated to his craft, where like up into his last breaths, he was like pumping out Crazy Cat pages. I feel like I actually got a tattoo of Ignatz and Crazy Cat to remind me of that story, because I really I get a lot of inspiration from that kind of dedication and love for the craft. That might be over dramatic, but yeah, I pull a ton of inspiration from that. And also, it's a good kick in the pants for somebody my age, where it's like, I'm a little tired from work. I don't know if I have time for. And then you have to remember, like, Charles Schultz, like, was rocking some stuff. Oh, Chuck Close. Chuck, Chuck. He's kind of a badass. But yeah, he was like, again, like as a young man, became really well known in this like photoreal scene. And you can look at his stuff. Like the first thing that'll probably show up if you Google it is like a black and white portrait of him with a cigarette. It's like a self-portrait. And then you can kind of see the later stuff where it's like these crazy abstractions, like they're paintings that are made with like these weird little circles and squares, and it's basically just a painting done on a grid system. um and this is before kind of pixels were used to kind of make photos, but it's almost like the style that he's doing it in is kind of breaking an image down into different pixels and then abstracting and creating a geometric design within each pixel. And it's really inspiring stuff. And then if you consider that he was like, bound to a wheelchair and could barely move when he was making those, it's like 10 times more inspiring looking at those. Yeah, there's a million art stories. That guy, though, it's funny, when I was a really young artist, like I think I was just getting into college when I got like really heavy into Chuck Close. He was definitely one of the first artists I got like really into. And not because of his biography. I actually didn't know his biography when I first got into his stuff. And then I found that out later and was like, whoa. But I remember when I was first kind of taking painting courses and stuff, I was like all about Chuck Close for a while. And then as I got more into painting, I got more into like oils and like, like Rembrandt's later work and like Lucian Freud and like kind of more expressive, like really thick life painters and stuff. But I don't really get the opportunity to paint a lot. I think it would be fun at some point to, like, whenever I'm done with, possibly when I'm done with this graphic novel and then the next one that I have to get done, I might take like a break for like a month and just paint. I say that now, but I might have another comic idea that I want to see come to life. And comics are my favorite medium to work in. Although in theory, you can do a painted comic, Dave McKean did some pretty amazing fully painted comics. How are you doing, Anil? And am I pronouncing that right? I really hope I'm pronouncing your name right and not like butchering it. Let's see here. I think it is important. Like, it's funny because when I was going to art school, I think art history was like my least favorite class. Like, it was always kind of a snoozer, and it was a drag, and you had to remember all these artist names and dates and stuff like that. And at the time, it kind of felt like a chore because it was cool to learn about other artists, but it was just like the format of those classes. I don't know if they've improved in the last few years, but it was kind of a drag. And I like history a lot, but at the time, I don't think I was appreciating what I was absorbing. But I have to say, in retrospect, it's like so essential to have those classes and to get like a good like broad idea of like the history of art, of like some of the theoretical philosophies in art and like the different art theory out there, and get familiar with like some of the different movements in art. It's something I am surprised how often I kind of reference like later. And a lot of that I didn't necessarily even know I'd be like kind of pulling from or like finding inspiration from within comics, because I think as like a young man, it's like, especially as a young artist, you just kind of want to get your hands dirty and like start drawing and learning, the craft, not necessarily the history of it, but the history informs the craft so much. And also it's super helpful to like kind of keep you in the game for a long time. Because it's a hard field, you know, it's like breaking into art and trying to do that for a living. You're joining a club of like a lot of people who want to do the same exact thing. Because it's a pretty expressive and fun job, even on the commercial end. You know, I get a lot of joy out of it. Like if I have a bad day at work, at my day job, I have to like stop and remind myself like that, like what I'm doing, and be like, oh yeah, this is actually pretty awesome. Like it's pretty awesome to get paid to draw and create and be creative and like iterate and try to visually solve like a client's needs. Like that's a pretty unique and cool job. But like I said, there's a lot of like weird, you know, and you guys know if you've been in it, but there's a lot of weird, crazy things that come up on the path of an artist that you could feel are like uniquely a struggle you're going through. And it could be like, I mean, this is half of why I write, you know, comics that talk really openly about like mental health issues. The problem about not talking about mental health issues, right, is that like people who go through it kind of feel alone and isolated and like feel like it's this unique experience that only they are going through, and they can start to feel like they're like literally crazy or something, as opposed to just sort of like in a weird way, like normalizing it sort of makes it less taboo, and then also less isolating, and actually makes it less bad, right? Because half of the problem with mental illness issues in general is like isolation, or like feeling estranged or disconnected or feeling like you're crazy. And so it's the same thing with art and art history, right? Like if you, yeah. So anyhow, Lucian Freud and Jenny Seville were my artists for college. Yeah, Lucian Freud's bomb, dude. Their color palette and layering helped me a lot. Yeah, yeah, and that's the other thing. You can pull so many good color palettes and thoughts and stuff. And then okay, the way you pronounce it is close, kinda. It does rhyme with the word tunnel, but you just drop the word T from tunnel. So Anil. Anil. Cool. I think I got it. If I got it right there, let me know. Anil. I'm going to try to remember that tunnel thing. And if I forget, just give me grief in the chats. All right. So we're making some progress here, and we're getting a little further. It is funny though. I think my wife's a relatively quicker artist than I am. Like she's a lot quicker at drawing, and so it was like the other day, we were gonna go to the park with my son Ben. It was like on Saturday or something, and I was like, okay, well, I know I need to do. It was a specific panel that I knew I needed to get done that day, and I was like, so I'm gonna kind of probably just finish this up, and then we can go. And it hadn't been inked at all, and so I was like, it'll be a quick one, you know. And she's like, okay. And it was like an hour and a half later, which is pretty quick for me. I had that panel finished, but my wife was like, that was not quick. And I realized like, oh yeah, we're a little different in our pacing of art in general too. Because when she draws, it's like, you know, an hour or two is like a pretty long time to spend on like one section of an illustration. Whereas for me, like, you know, if I can manage to finish this panel in like 2 hours, I feel like, hey, that's a pretty quick panel. It's interesting. Okay, and then we got cool, I got it. Okay. I almost am hesitant to say it again because I don't want to get it wrong, but I'm gonna give it a shot. So Anno. Cool. But yeah, it is funny how like perceptions of time are too. Because to me, 2 hours isn't really a long time to spend on a piece of art, like at all. Like, although it is interesting because like in digital art with, especially graphic design and stuff, I can knock stuff out really quick. But like for, comics and stuff that you really, dig, I don't know. That's another reason I like kind of studying art history a little bit, or at least not that I do a lot of studying of that anymore, but I appreciate the many art history classes I've had to take throughout my life. And another reason is like that, even like learning from other cartoonists, like a real life changing moment for me as a cartoonist was this exhibit in the 2000s. I can't remember when specifically, but it was like early 2000s, called the Masters of American Comics exhibit. And I think it was a traveling exhibition that was at like a couple modern art museums, but like it was at, I believe it was MoMA. No, it was at the Hammer. Sorry, my brain was farting for a second there. And it was such an incredibly inspiring show where they had like a bunch of original inks and pages by like these very famous classic cartoonists. And it was interesting, to say the least. It was just it was mind blowing, and I got to see the scale that like all these guys I admire. And yeah. Have you ever drawn a panel using blood? Doesn't have to be human, but like pig's blood, just to see what it's like. No, I'm not really a big fan of drawing in blood. I guess if I was working on like the Kiss comic for Marvel, if I was working for the printer, I would have to say yes, right? Because I think Marvel, didn't they kind of had a gimmick where they had said they put Kiss's blood into their ink. That being said, I have definitely had times, especially playing music where I've bled for my art, like literally. I have a particular guitar that has definitely had its share of like blood on it from some shows from when I was a, teenager. And that wasn't from like intentional blood or like showmanship or anything. It was like, a couple rough shows, or you're like playing real hard and you like clip your finger and it just goes like sprays on your guitar. Because I played a lot harder at that time too. I used to use really thick picks. Now I play a lot more gentle. Interesting. In middle school, we had to take a basic art class and we used different size pencils, paint, and charcoal. But at the time, our teacher told us to look at old newspaper clippings, a magnifying glass, and the image was made up of dots. We had to recreate a picture using that technique. Yeah. I mean, Ben-Day dots and halftones are the lifeblood of print, even to this day. I mean, now it's more printing in pixels, but still, if you look at stuff that's offset under like a viewfinder, yeah, you're gonna find that you see actual either dots or squares. but usually you're going to see little dots. The only case where that may not happen would be with like a screen print. But even screen prints, right, like have a line screen. So a lot of the ink kind of merges together in the open areas. So it gets a much flatter picture of color, but even those, you're still going to see a little paper texture and stuff through it. One of my favorite things as an illustrator, especially when I was doing t-shirts, I got really into learning different techniques of like generating halftones that were very authentic to vintage B movie posters and vintage pulps and vintage comics. And I got pretty darn good at that technique. Like it's fun to work with too, because you have a limit with your color. And I definitely recommend that for anyone. Like limit your palette. If you find that your colors are struggling or you're new to color, really limit your palette. Like make like arbitrary rules when you're working on something. Be like, I have these 5 colors to work with. You know, painting too. If you have like more than 16 colors, like on a palette, you might have too many colors. And then digitally, you have like access to millions of colors. But if you're trying to make your digital paintings look more like real paintings, like a big bet with that, like to make the color kind of hold together and stuff, is to really limit your color palette. Just because we can use the rainbow doesn't mean we should, right? Why am I talking about color palettes? Because this is a live stream and it's 1 a.m. Let's see. All right. We are getting there, though. I believe this will be potentially done. This is definitely another one of those scenarios, though, where I think I said this at the top, too. Quite often when I start these, I'm like, this shouldn't take that long at all. And then it does. And I think it's that like kind of amnesia that helps make comics. I don't know. I should remember to ask that the next art casters, next time I talk to another cartoonist. I mean, I'm curious with you guys, but like, does that happen at all to you? Like where you'll work on art and then just sort of have like an amnesia about it and be like, oh yeah, okay. Like this is actually hard after you get into it, but you're like initially like, yeah, I can do this. This is nothing. Like, and it's like, even though you've done it and you know it's like a crap load of work, you're like, yeah, this won't be that bad, you know? That's a good exercise though. I like that idea of like doing a Ben-Day dot painting. I was trying to get a good angle on that section, and I think I need to go back to the old angle because this works a little better. Okay. pretty excited about LA Comic-Con though. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and again, like it's kind of, I'm going to try to ease my way back into conventions, but it's the first convention too where I'm going to be testing out a theory of mine, because pretty much every convention prior, I'd always make sure I had like, you know, certain money making fallbacks at my booth just to make sure I made table and profit beyond that. It usually would be like, you know, I'd have some big ticket items that weren't comics. You'd have like your middle grade items, like, you know, that are like mid range. You have your high range of prices, and then you have your low range of prices, you know, and everything in between. But that way it's like, you know, and definitely you would want like prints and maybe t-shirts, and like I even had skateboards, you know, that were like my higher tier items. And that was great, and that would like pay for the table and stuff like that. But I also developed a theory in the last few years where I realized I think sometimes that could cause me to sell less books, because people are way more prone to kind of get those big ticket items. Like basically, like if you're a fast food place or a restaurant and you want to sell filet mignon, but you have like a million things on the menu, like it's like you're a short order chef that like is serving every kind of food, you're basically going to end up selling a lot of food that isn't specifically great. I don't know if that makes sense. But like by limiting your menu, you can kind of have like this really fine crafted food. You can develop a really strong reputation as a restaurant, right? I feel the same about conventions. So I'm going to mainly try to just do all books and stuff like that. Yeah, Jimmy was saying, I try not to worry about it since my art flow's state of mind will take care of it. I'm guessing you're talking about the thing I was saying about the time frames to make these things. Yeah, I don't stress too much about it. I just feel like there is like a trippy thing that happens where it's like I'm a bit amnesiac, or a bit of an amnesiac when it comes to when it comes to the amount of work. Like something about my brain just lets me forget like how much work it is to make these things. And then I get into the pages and I'm like, oh, what am I doing? And then like I'll finish a page and be like, that was awesome. I need to make another page. It's just like a very strange but unique and kind of awesome thing. Definitely not a complaint, just an observation, you know? Wow. We're getting a lot closer, you guys. Much, much closer. All right. I'm going to step out for 2 seconds, and then I'm going to hit this thing with gusto, and that's going to happen. So I'll be right back, guys. All right, I'm back. One thing I'd recommend when working like this approach, where you're like inking directly over your pencils, you're gonna have to hit it with an eraser at the end, to kind of get rid of a lot of the pencil. And you don't want to hit it too hard. You want to make sure you get a decent like Stadler eraser or something that's not going to smudge your ink. And then also avoid the temptation to just hit it with the eraser the second you're done. You need to let your ink kind of dry and chill for so if you're like me and you work at night, I usually am just like, hey, tomorrow that'll be the first thing I hit before I move on to the next page. Another thing I'd suggest that I'm probably going to do before the scanning phase on these is like these rich blacks, like the area that, especially with these like Pentel inks, they don't dry like completely black. And the problem is when you scan it and you start doing your adjustments, like your threshold adjustments to make it like just solid black and white, make sure it's going to print real crisp, by making sure your line is aliased so that it's basically like just solid black and solid white, and then it'll print like beautifully. But the downside of that is that process becomes 20 times harder if your inks are kind of like, it's hard to see on stream, but I'll get a little close. Like, do you see all those little spots? So all of those marks, when you scan it, are going to like stand out like a sore thumb. And so what I do before I kind of scan these, I'm doing something a little different with this book. Usually what I would do is rough a page. Like I'd have my script and then I'd rough a page and then I'd pencil the page, ink the page, scan it, clean it up, and have it done, But this book, I'm taking this approach of kind of batching the work. So I'm doing like I did all my rough layouts, all my roughs, all my thumbnails for all 130-ish pages of this. I have it all scripted out and stuff like that. And then what I'm doing right now is sort of to keep myself interested is I am alternating a little bit, but I'm going to do the scans in batches. So there's going to be like a month where I'm just scanning pages and cleaning them up. But right now, I'm not even concerning myself with the scans. I'm just going to like get the originals done. And then in that scanning phase, I will probably go through every page. This is laborious, I know, but it'll make my scanning and cleanup go really quick. Especially if I might have like some friends over and just and maybe just buy everybody some beer or something, and then like we can all just scan and clean pages. But it'll make that process go like a million times quicker if the inks on them, like on the originals, are super clean and the blacks are like super solid. So what I'll do probably before scanning it, I know this is rambling, and again, like if this is interesting, let me know. If you want me to switch topics, you can let me know. If you really want me to switch topics, I do want to throw out there, and this is a nerdy thing, but hey, I take super chats, and one thing I will say about super chats is I guarantee I will read them as long as they are not demeaning of other people, and aren't like bannable things that you're asking me to read. But other than that, I am pretty much open to like reading or answering whatever is super chatted, and that will always take priority. And also, I will throw out there, like if I'm on a topic that's like really boring to you and there's something you're really curious about and you want me to switch topics, super chats are a good incentive. I'm rambling and mentioning that, but I'm just throwing that out there, guys. Let's see here. So I do think it's helpful, though, especially if somebody's new to inking. So I'm going to keep on this topic. So so once like before I get to scanning, the thing I'm going to do is I will literally go over every single area of solid black one more time, and I'll hit it again so that it just becomes like very solid black. That does two things. It makes the scanning process easier, And then if I ever get to a point where I'm willing to kind of part with these pages, it allows me to sell originals that look gorgeous. So yeah. Because the nice thing to me, like the biggest value of hand lettering, other than just kind of having that that feel of like authenticity when you're reading something, there is something to be said about like hand lettered pages just kind of blend with the page really well. They match the aesthetic. They put more authorship in the hand of like the cartoonist doing it. Those little mistakes that you're inevitably going to make with your hand lettering, I personally think are like a huge vocabulary in comics. And I always think it's a shame when artists don't take advantage of that. Not that it's wrong. Like, Jacob's Apartment, for instance, has a lot of custom lettering, but I didn't do that lettering by hand. So this is something I've arrived at more recently, like with 2 stories, but I have become more and more convicted that I think it's the way to go when it comes to comics. Like I think it's worth pursuing hand lettering. The other nice thing about hand lettering and darkening your spots is oh, cool. Jimmy was saying, I love this topic. I'm currently trying to look into what ink to use for darkening spots and not having to use those ink strokes stand out. Yeah, quite often just a second pass at it. I'll do one real quick. I'm not going to do it forever, but let's say it was like this eyeball. I would just go over it a second time. And you're going to notice, like, I'll do this too. You'll notice like after that dries, it'll just look like way more solidly black than it was before. And it doesn't take that long to do, but I will tell you on your originals, you can probably see it. I mean, this hasn't dried yet, but you can probably see how that makes that a much more rich black. So that's a tip, but I'm probably going to do that in batches. I used to do that as like a last stage when I finished a page. But now I'm going to wait till I've finished every page for the comic to kind of do those, all the production work. And also depending on how many comics I have, like, because I'm going to be juggling, there's going to come a point, I think, in the next year where I'm going to have to juggle the creation of 2 of these books. And so as I'm juggling that, I might look into getting some assistance or something like that. Or, maybe, I don't know. It depends on how much control I'm willing to let go of the process. But but like having somebody like repatch the inks or something like that might be a thing that I might have to do. So we'll find out. If I do that, I will be really transparent about that. I've never done that in the past. I tend to like handling everything when it comes to my own comics. But that might be something I'll be looking into. And then Jimmy said, I love this. Oh, yeah. The other thing I would say is like the Pentel ink, like if you're using a brush pen, it does dry a little bit lighter, which isn't a problem except in large areas of black. And for like the Pentel ink, that's what I found is like that second pass works. I know that like back when I used to do more like dip ink, it used to be the case that it was Higgins Black Magic. I've heard that they've changed their formula though, so it's not as good. But back in the day with Higgins Black Magic, like one pass of ink would dry pretty darn solid. So if you were using like a Series 7, that used to be the go-to with traditional. I've heard that Dr. Martens has some really good black ink that dries pretty solid. The trick with Black Magic, the last time I used to use that, was you would leave your bottle open overnight, and it would kind of like thicken up a little bit. But you wouldn't want to leave it open for too long, right? Because you don't want it to like get moldy and like, or just dry. But if you left it overnight back in the day, that was like the little trick to like thickening your ink. But now that I really like using these brush pens because they dry a lot quicker, then that's one of the biggest advantages. So like to do hatching like this, you'll notice I don't have to wait quite as long as I would with a dip brush to do like my second pass of strokes. So if I were doing this on a dip brush, I'd probably do all the strokes that are heading in one direction, chill for a bit, let it dry, then hit the second pass, which to me feels a little less organic. And the more you can kind of make it feel like drawing, the more kind of fluid your lines can be and your hatching can be and stuff. So totally rambling, but I can ink nerd out like all night. I absolutely love the process of inking. It's one of my favorite things in the world. And I've changed my approach to it quite a few times, which I think would be really interesting for people too who like follow my current stuff. Like Jacob's, it's still me and it still looks a lot like my style, but Jacob's Apartment is a very interesting departure from the way I currently work, because it's actually a book that it's literally the first graphic novel I completely finished. So it's different in a couple ways. It's full color, which is like pretty ambitious, and all the color inks, everything like that was done by me. It's definitely more of like an open line style, not an open line, but like a thick, like sort of contour style, like a much more like kind of like your more standard, like drawing the Marvel way kind of approach to like the form, where it was very solid blacks and solid lines and very clear kind of, not a lot of hatching. And I'm really proud of that book. I think it's an incredible book. If I do say so myself, I hope that doesn't sound cocky, but I feel really good about it. Like, I love it. But I think it'll be interesting for people who followed my work for years too, because it's like, it's an interesting deviation from my style, but it's still like my style, And then the other book project that I can't quite talk about yet, that might be the one that I'm having to do on top of this. That one I'm going to be doing digitally, and that's a much more kind of rendery approach. So the rendering is much more like a, let's see. It's definitely not hatched. It's more like a texture, sort of textured approach. A little bit like stippling, but not quite. Much more like brush oriented and pencil oriented. So it's going to be kind of interesting. But also people are familiar with like Two Stories. It's like I switch styles in that. Like it literally alternates between two different styles. And so the fact that like my graphic novels might alternate a bit, I think there's still inevitably a style that's going to sing through it. That's definitely a uniquely my style kind of thing. But yeah. Jimmy said, I've been told to use Dr. Martin. I have to test one out. Yeah. The inks, yeah, I think they're I don't know. Again, like the problem is they change their formulas a lot. And so it's really hard to say. The paper makes a big difference too. Like for me, I always am at minimum using like Strathmore. I like using the, oh my goodness, the vellum surface. And I like using like 300 weight, like minimum. If I had my way, I'd be doing every page on like 600, but I don't have a fortune to draw these pages, you know. I don't know if you guys have ever inked on 600. It's so nice. It's like, it's obnoxious, that paper. Let's see. If you had to do a practice sketch to catch a local lawnmower thief, would you use cross-hatching technique? Would that still be part of the wanted poster? That's so funny. I feel like cross-hatch, I'm trying to get this, but I'm guessing you're making a joke about the idea of cross-hatching being kind of like a method of lawn mowing, which I think is hilarious. But it depends, man. I have like a million styles I can work in. If I were being like a courtroom sketch artist, I'd probably draw more like I sketch from life, you know. When I sketch from life, I usually do more contour, you know, so I'd be more like kind of like that, where I'm just gonna noodle my hand real quick, right? Where I'd like do much more like quick gestural, like, right? Does that make sense? Like it would be, I mean, this is super noodly, but like I'd just be trying to get those basic shapes, right, that I'm looking at. And it would be much more like organic, like, oh, I'm kind of doing this like more noodly style. Something I could do quickly, and I might use washes. I don't know about police sketch artists anymore. But I do. I used to know some courtroom artists, and like, man, those people can life draw like crazy. But usually, what they'll use is like watercolors, pastels, or pencil with like mixed media. A lot of people use tablets now too, but even when they're using tablets, they're doing washes to just really quickly knock it out. So, Jimmy said, I bought 2 stories a while back, and I'll make sure to read it by LA Comic Con and see that hatching. Thanks, man. I hope you enjoy it when you do read it and stuff. And bring it by LA Comic Con. I'll sign it and stuff if you want, or not. But I'm more than happy to sign copies of my books to you. So yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging with me on the stream. We've actually managed, check this out, we've managed to finish this entire page. So if you want a closer look at this panel, I usually, as I complete panels, I'll shoot a real quick picture of it and post it on Instagram. So make sure you guys are following me on Instagram. It's good seeing y'all in the chats, and it's so fun to hang out with artists. Dr. Evil, it was nice having you on Twitch, joining in. I'm still kind of building on Twitch. I think my main hub of like subscribers and stuff so far is on YouTube, but I'm still kind of doing these cross stream to Twitch as well, because I really like Twitch, and I do feel like it would be fun to kind of grow there as I learn the format there too. So thank you. If you guys enjoyed this, make sure you're subscribed, you're following. If you're watching on YouTube, obviously, like, hit that bell so you get notifications when I'm about to go live. Again, like, check out the links to Jacob's apartment and 2 stories down there in the comments section. And yeah, check out my website and all that fun stuff. And yeah, I really appreciate you guys stopping by, and I hope you guys have a really good night and have a really productive, creative few days or whatever ahead of you. I'm going to be trying to do these almost nightly too, so I will probably be seeing you guys. Let's see. Oh, today's Thursday, so it's Artcasters. So I will see you guys on Artcasters, which I think is going to be on Corey's channel today, but it might be on Scott's. But anyhow, I'll mention it on social media as well. So thanks, and have a good night, guys. And thanks for hanging out with me while we make comics, which is awesome. All right. See you guys.